In this video, I'd like to discuss the idea of moving our federal government toward a more direct democracy model. Many of you may know that in the early days of our government and our society, that when the Constitution was being debated, for example, in the Federalist Papers, and there were discussions about how much power to give to a federal government and the ways that a new federal government could be organized in the United States from among the 13 colonies, that we had a situation where there was a high degree of illiteracy among the general population in the United States. There were no modern transportation technologies. There were no automobiles. There were not even trains at that time. There were only horse and buggy types of conveyance for getting from one place to another besides going on foot. There were, of course, no telephones. There was no internet. There were no computers. So for a combination of reasons related to both the high illiteracy factors and the relatively rare existence of people who were well read about history, the lack of communication, modern communication technologies, the lack of transportation technologies, it wasn't feasible to create a direct democracy model whereby people would, for example, as it could be done in the current day, educate themselves about matters via websites and then vote online in a secure manner, or other forms of democracy that would be closer to a direct democracy model as opposed to a representative democracy model. But again, in that day, representative democracy was really the only feasible option. And so it was a question of what form the representative democracy would take. And the form that was chosen was more progressive than anything that existed in Europe or among major societies in that day. Yet at the same time, when our federal government was formed, it was understood that any government, even with this concept of checks and balances of power between the executive and the judicial and the legislative branch and so forth, could be easily corrupted in time. Because after all, corrupting a government is something that's fairly easily done if that's your objective. If there's enough people who lean in the direction of corrupt values and less integrity than those who really are going to defend the integrity of public processes. And one of the greatest threats to that integrity of a federal government is money powers, the entry of money into politics, and the marriage between high financial sectors and high government and political sectors. And this is, of course, a process that we have witnessed unfold in our society over the period of the last several hundred years. And there have been peaks and valleys in terms of the struggle between high integrity, honest political processes, public processes, and major corruption. And typically what happens is you have corruption develop to a certain point to where it becomes very obvious, more or less intolerable, causes public open reactions, train wrecks, and major, how shall we say, sort of fraudulent events, and then the public and legislators and etc. are forced to clean up their act. Then it's a process of sort of going downhill until the next train wreck occurs, you might say. And I would say that now in this 2013 time frame, we're at a period where we've hit a train wreck, really. This will become more evident as the days and months, years proceed, I'm sure. And I think it's a train wreck of such nature and scope, so broad, that we're not going to be able to put Humpty Dumpty back together in the way that we have in the last couple hundred years, several centuries, since the U.S. Federal government was formed, ratified via the ratification of the Constitution, Bill of Rights, and so forth. And that this time it's going to take a more substantial reinvention of governance and of, as part of that, are regulatory structures regulating the main financial sector interests, corporate sector interests, and so forth. So this is something we can see as very intimidating, or as very exciting, or anywhere in between, depending on how we feel when we wake up that particular day. But I think it's something that has to be done at this time. And one of the themes that I want to mention here and discuss in subsequent blog posts and videos and so forth is this concept of moving more toward direct democracy. I feel that the electoral college, for example, is a very outdated structure that needs to go. The sooner the better. But having said that, I feel that 535 representatives to represent a nation of over 300 million people that has such access to the internet-based educational resources and networking resources and universities and colleges for many generations and so forth is very inappropriate. We need something that is much closer to internet-based referenda voting, and I want to also discuss concepts of jury-based government, which I will go into more in subsequent installments. The purpose of this brief video is just to introduce a series of other installments, audio, video, and text, on this topic of reinventing government in the United States in the years soon to come.